Namaste and welcome. Presentation on Negotiable Instruments Act 1881. Here we will be studying Negotiable Instrument Act and its various provisions grouped into 6 heads under concepts or definitions, negotiation and its processes, presentment and the steps involved, liability of various parties, how a discharge takes place in respect of various negotiable instruments, and what are the steps to be taken when there is an act of dishonor. This is the chapter which will cover various definitions given under the Act, and we will slightly get into details of promissory note, bill of exchange, check, parties, what is maturity date, and what is holder in due course. Simultaneously, we will also cover definitions of other relevant concepts. What is a negotiable instrument? Negotiable instrument means three things. It is a promissory note, it's a bill of exchange, or it can also be a check, and this may be payable to order or payable to bearer. And we have to remember, check is one type of bill of exchange. Therefore, two major categories of negotiable instruments will be number one, promissory note, number two, bills of exchange. Who can be a party to a negotiable instrument? Every person capable of contracting according to law, who is capable of binding himself and bound by making, drawing, accepting, endorsement, delivery and negotiation of the three documents: promissory note, bill of exchange or check. Means one should be able to bind himself in any of these roles, and for that he should be capable of contracting according to the applicable law. Can a minor be a party to it? Minor can be a party to it, but he can bind everyone, but he will not be binding himself. It is confirmed position. Minor can do all things, but nobody can bind him. He can bind everybody. A negotiable instrument can be executed through an agent who should be duly authorized. But we have to discriminate between the authority given to him. If an agent having a general authority to transact business does not automatically get the right to accept or endorse a bill of exchange. That is to say, power of accepting or endorsing bills of exchange has to be specifically granted to an agent. It doesn't come through the general power of attorney. Second, even when the power is given, authority given to draw bills of exchange does not automatically mean authority to endorse. It is so specific and pointed. Authority to draw means it is confined to drawing, not endorsing. If at all an agent wants to endorse a document, he should get a specific power assigned to him through a document. Let's have a look at promissory note. This is a typical template of promissory note. I promise to pay B or order rupees 500. The person who signs is A and he is called as the maker of the promissory note because he makes the promise. If we look into the definition of promissory note, it is an instrument in writing, but it is not covering bank note or currency note. If you take up any currency note, it will contain a similar promise signed by the governor of Reserve Bank. I promise to pay the bearer rupees 500 is written on the 500 rupees note. It is not covered under promissory note definition of negotiable instruments. What does it contain? A promissory note is an instrument in writing, contains an unconditional undertaking. What is undertaking? I promise. I promise itself is an undertaking. Signed by the maker. It is signed by the maker to pay a certain sum of money. It is 500, not approximately 500 or around 500 or 500 and additionally something extra. No, it is pay a certain sum of money only to pay to B or to the order. It can also be payable to a bearer of the instrument also. If a document fulfills these conditions, it becomes a promissory note under the Negotiable Instrument Act. What is a bill of exchange? Have a template of the bill of exchange. For example, it starts with, it will have a date and all that. 30 days from today, pay B or order rupees 1000 for value received, signed by, in case of promissory note we call them as maker, here he is called as the drawer. And what is it containing? Let us go through the definition. It is an instrument in writing containing, what does it contain? It says pay B or order, means it is giving an instruction. It is ordering someone, pay B or order. It is an unconditional order. It's saying just pay him, no conditions attached. It's an unconditional order signed by the maker, directing a certain person. Who is directed? There is one more person who will receive this and they say, okay, accepted, I will pay. Let us suppose he is, say, C. Directing a certain person to pay a certain sum of money, pay 1000 rupees to or to the order, to B or to his order of a certain person. It can be to the bearer also of the instrument. Now, this is bill of exchange, an instrument in writing containing an unconditional order. It orders someone to pay, whereas the promissory note promises to pay a sum of money to or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. And the person who makes a bill of exchange is known as a drawer. He orders, and whoever takes order, he is known as acceptor. He will also sign subsequently. This is the definition of bill of exchange. Then come to check. Take a check format. What does it say? Whatever we fill up, pay B or order or bearer rupees 1000 only, signed. The account holder signs. What is he called? He is called a drawer. If I sign my check, I am a drawer. And what I am doing? I am giving an order to pay 1000 rupees to a specific person. If you see the definition, check is a bill of exchange, and this check is always issued on a specified banker, say HDFC Bank, and it has to be paid on demand only. Whoever carries the check, he has to go to the counter and ask them to pay. Unless a person comes and asks, he is not supposed to pay. Therefore it says not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. To put it the positive way, it has to be paid only on demand. Whoever carries the check, he has to demand payment. And it includes electronic image of truncated checks. This is used in the bank clearance process from the past few years. And it also includes check in an electronic form because of the net banking. We can just see What are these two? Check in the electronic form is generated by using the computer resource. It is digitally signed and it carries an electronic signature as required, as good as a check. And what is truncated check? Truncated check is a check which is truncated in the course of clearing circle. It is between banks and their clearing house. It doesn't come into public usage either by the clearing house or by the bank, whether paying or receiving payment. Immediately on generation of electronic image for transmission, substituting further physical moment of check in writing. What actually happens is, in the course of clearance, the bank creates an electronic image and that is transmitted to the clearing house, and that stops the physical movement of the original check which bank is having. And this truncated check which is generated by the bank becomes the check for all purposes from the moment it is generated. This is regarding the three instruments and two supplementary items of check. While we go through definition in respect of these different concepts, let us remember a template of a bill of exchange. 30 days from date, pay B or order rupees 1000 for value received, signed by the drawer. It will be accepted by the acceptor. Let us just take it out. The maker of a bill of exchange. Who is the maker of a bill of exchange? He is the drawer. The maker of a bill of exchange or check is called the drawer. When you prepare a check and sign it, you become a drawer. And what it says, the person thereby directed to pay. Drawer is, let us suppose, A. He is asking Mr. C to pay B or order. Who is the person directed to pay? Directed to pay is C. Who accepts it? He is called the drawee. In case of a check, you draw it on a bank and you ask banker to pay. Therefore, banker becomes the drawee. Drawer and drawee. Maker is the drawer and one who is directed to pay is the drawee. Drawee in case of need. For example, here the drawee is C. Sometimes it so happens we will have C as the drawee, but we will have mention of one more person to be contacted if C is not available to accept. He is called drawee in case of need. He is a standby. When in the bill or in endorsement thereon the name of any person in addition to drawee, in case of need, such person is called drawee in case of need. If C doesn't accept, we can always fall back on D for acceptance, and because he is the drawee in case of need. Who is the acceptor? After the drawer signs, the drawee of a bill has signed his assent. He signs it as accepted. Once he signs, he hands it over. Delivered the same or given notice of the signing to the holder. Whoever holds this, payment has to be made to B. It will be with the representative of B or B himself. And Mr. C will accept and inform B or his agent, given notice of signing to the holder, and the person who signs and returns to the holder is known as acceptor. In our case, he is Mr. C. What happens is, now A has drawn, C has signed, he has to pay on 30 days from date. On 30 days he doesn't pay, the bill is dishonored. There is a process of noting and protest once it is dishonored. And there is one more probability here. For saving the honor of the drawer, there is one more person who comes into picture. Maybe he is a surety type of person. He is known as acceptor for honor. He comes to rescue the drawer on default and he accepts it. Supra protest. After dishonor, after noting and protesting, there is one more savior who comes and signs. He is known as acceptor for honor. Acceptor for honor accepts it after noting and protest. And he is some sort of a protector of the interest of the drawer or acceptor or endorser. Who is payee? In a check, a person who is supposed to receive. In a bill, one who is supposed to receive the proceeds. In this case, it says 30 days from date pay B. B is supposed to receive the money. The person named in the instrument, to whom or to whose order the money is payable by the instrument, is called the payee. One who receives money is called the payee under the instrument. And this talks of various options. A negotiable instrument may be made payable to not only B, it may be B and C, more payees jointly, or it may be made payable in the alternative to B or D, or one or some of several players, B and C out of B, C, D, E, F. Means the payee can be more than one. This is what the Act says. We will now understand something about the maturity date of an instrument. In a promissory note or bill of exchange, there is a term called at sight or on presentment. When it comes as at sight or presentment, means there is no gap between the document presentation and the payment. It is paid on demand, just like a check. There is a concept called after sight. In after sight, there is a gap. Either it has to be presented for sight or there should be an acceptance. Only when this is done, there is a payment forthcoming. Otherwise, there is no payment forthcoming for non-acceptance or protest for non-acceptance. Presentment for sight involves one more additional step before the payment is made. It is not payment on demand. Maturity is the date on which the payment of the instrument falls due. Now, there is a concept of days of grace in respect of promissory note and bill of exchange, which are not under any of these three categories. They are not payable on demand, they are not payable at sight, or they are not payable on presentment. If the document is not belonging to any of these categories, the maturity date will be on the due date plus 3 days extra added to it. The plus 3 days which we are talking of is known as the days of grace. We can understand these days of grace with a concrete example. What does it mean? The period shall be stated to terminate on the date of the month on which corresponds with the day on which the instrument is dated. For example, if your bill, which is not any of these three categories, is payable after 1 month, what does it say? It will be due on a date corresponding day on the next month. What is corresponding day of the next month? It is 29th February, which is the next month. Unfortunately, we don't have 29th February on 29th February 2019. It is not a leap year. In that case, what is the last day of that month? it is 28th February. This is what it says. The period stated shall be held to terminate on the day of the month which corresponds with the day on which the instrument is dated. If the month in which the period would terminate has no corresponding day, we don't have a corresponding day on February, the period shall be held to terminate on the last day of the month. Therefore, we have taken 28th February. But what we are saying in this case, we have got a concept of days of grace. Yes, it falls due on 28th, but we need to add 3 more days as days of grace. Therefore, it says, if a bill says 29 February 2019 payable after 1 month, it will be 3rd day after 28th February. Means 1st March, 2nd March and 3rd March. It will be payable on 3rd March 2019. Take another example. 30th August payable after 3 months. August means September, October, November. 3 months means 30th of November. To 30th of November, we have to add 3 more days. Means it is 1st of December, 2nd of December and 3rd of December. Therefore, it says if it is 30th August 2020, 3 months plus 3 grace days, it will become due on 3rd December 2020. Take another example. 31st August. Here we say it should be the corresponding day on the after 3 months. October, November, December. Sorry, September, October, November. In November, we need to go for 31st. 31st August, 31st November. But unfortunately, 31st, there is no 31st in November. There is only 30. We will go by this rule. If the month in which the period would terminate has no corresponding day, the period shall be held to terminate on the last day of the month. Last day is 30th. Plus 3 days of grace. Once again, it will be 3rd December 2020. And this is an example of how does it work. And there is one more thing we have to remember. Government every year publishes a list of public holidays. If this days calculated falls on a public holiday, how does it work when it is to be paid? This Act provides for. The Act provides for in section 23. It says, when the day on which a promissory note or bill of exchange is at maturity is a public holiday. For example, here we are talking of 3rd December 2020 is the due date for making the payment. If it is a public holiday, it says the instrument shall be deemed to be due the preceding business day. What is the preceding business day? 2nd December 2020. The previous day, 2nd December 2020. This principle, and this is the reason why all government holidays are declared under Negotiable Instruments Act to cover that under the provision of section 23. When a day on which the promissory note or bill of exchange is at maturity is a public holiday, the instrument shall be deemed to be on the next preceding day. Means this provision can be applied for all days only when the holiday is declared as a public holiday under the Negotiable Instruments Act. One more thing comes. If on this day, this is on public holiday already declared. If there is a new public holiday declared in an emergency, you can't go to preceding day. For example, 8th December of 2018 was declared as public holiday on the death of one of the former chief ministers in Tamil Nadu. In that case, it will not be the preceding day because it is an emergency. It will go to the succeeding day. If 8th December, if your bill was due to be paid after days of grace, then it will go to the subsequent day. Means if any public holiday is declared in advance, it will be the preceding day. If there is an emergency public holiday declared without notice, then the day will not be preceding, it will be the succeeding day. Let's understand the word holder. Holder of a document, promissory note, bill of exchange or check, means a person entitled in his own name for two things. In his own name, he is entitled to the possession of the document and to receive or recover the amount due under the documents. If he fulfills both these conditions, we call him as holder. If the bill or the promissory note is lost or destroyed, as a holder, he will be entitled for having the documents or receiving the compensation in case of loss. Therefore, fulfilling the conditions of possession and right to receive or recover the amount due makes one a holder. What is holder in due course? Holder in due course has to be seen in respect of two types of documents. In respect of documents payable to bearer and document payable to order. If it is document payable to bearer, a bearer check or a bearer bill of exchange, the person must have come to possess it for a consideration. A bearer instrument will give you possession only if you have taken it under a contract with consideration. If it is payable to order, then you have to be a payee or endorsee as recorded on the documents itself. And there should be good faith on the part of the holder in due course. When he has acquired this document for consideration or as a payee or endorsee, he should not have any doubt that there is any defect in the title from whom he collected the document. The person who passed him on the title should not have any defect in the title, and that should be based on the good faith and trust of the holder. Therefore, holder in due course is a position of trust, good faith, and absolutely no negligence. And what is payment in due course? Whenever you make a payment under a document fulfilling two conditions, one, you pay to the person who apparently held the document in accordance with what appeared on the face of the instrument. You paid in good faith and you paid without negligence. And you absolutely had no doubt about his credentials in entitlement to receive the payment. When these conditions are fulfilled, the payment is called as payment in due course. Payment in good faith, payment without negligence, and payment under circumstances affording no ground to believe that the person is not entitled to receive the payment. When these conditions are fulfilled, it becomes payment in due course. Holder, holder in due course, and payment in due course. Let's understand few more concepts. A concept of ambiguous instruments. Ambiguous means confusing. It gives multiple meanings, multiple options, and we have to clear the confusion. Where an instrument may be construed, it can be a promissory note or a bill of exchange. He has worded the bill of exchange or promissory note in such a way that it is, because a bill of exchange is an order to pay, whereas a promissory note is an undertaking to pay or promise to pay. He has prepared document in such a way that it is both an undertaking as well as an order. When it can be both, it is called ambiguous instrument, where an instrument could be construed as a promissory note or a bill of exchange. It is the holder who has to make the election, and once he elects, either he calls it as a bill of exchange or promissory note. From then onwards, it will be known accordingly. If you choose us to be promissory note, it will be treated as promissory note. If you choose us as bill of exchange, it will be a bill of exchange. That is ambiguous instruments. If in a document, if the amount is stated differently in figures and words, what should prevail? The Act says the amount stated in words is final. If in a check or a bill of exchange, in amount you say figures 10,000 and in numbers, in figures you say 10,000 and in words you write as 1,000, then it will be only 1,000 because what you write in words prevails. And one thing we have to remember, check is always payable on demand. But in case of promissory note or bill of exchange, where there is no time mentioned, it doesn't mention about the time frame, then the rule says it can be payable on demand whenever the time is not mentioned. However, in case of a check, whether you mention time or not, whether you mention date or not, it is always payable on demand. In case of promissory note or bill of exchange, when time is not mentioned in the document, it can be payable on demand. Then comes the inchoate stamped instruments. Let us take an example. Take stamp duty as 1%. For a document of the value of 10,000, you have to affix a stamp of 100. My good friend, he prepared a document where the stamp duty was 1% and his amount required was 10,000. He was supposed to pay 100 as stamp duty, but he affixed a stamp of 300, left the amount blank and signed the document. Now, intended amount was 10,000, but what stamp he affixed, someone can fill up the amount of 30,000. This is known as a inchoate stamped instrument. What does it say? Where one person signs and delivers a paper stamped in accordance with law relating to Negotiable Instruments Act in force in India, either wholly blank, he didn't write the amount, written it incompletely, the holder, whoever gets that document, he can complete it, and though the right amount is 10,000, it says he can complete it by putting any amount but not exceeding the amount covered by the stamp. If the holder, instead of putting 10,000, if he puts 30,000, that is covered by the stamp of 300 already affixed there. And the person so signing, one who signed here blank, he will be liable for payment of that full amount to any holder in due course. Anybody brings that and there the amount written as 30,000, he has to pay. And this is the meaning of inchoate stamped instrument. Let's understand section 42. It says, an acceptor of a bill of exchange drawn in a fictitious name payable to drawer's order is not relieved from liability to a holder in due course claiming under an endorsement by the same hand as the drawer's signature and purported to be made by the drawer. Take an instance. A is a fictitious person. Bill is accepted by C. What A does, he endorses this bill to D, and D has paid money to A, rupees 1,000. And on the due date, D presents it to C, stating that it is due today, pay me back 1,000, I am holder in due course. Holder in HIDC. What section? C cannot say that A doesn't exist, it is a fictitious person, therefore that whole document is forged. and it need not have to be paid. Section 42 comes to the rescue of D, who is a holder in due course. It says an acceptor, in this case the C, of a bill drawn in a fictitious name and payable to drawer's order, not relieved from liability to a holder in due course, claiming under endorsement by the drawer in the same hand as the drawer's signature and purported to be made by drawer. He doesn't say A has signed it, but it appears to be the same handwriting of the drawer. In such a case, a holder in due course is protected under section 42. Second one, negotiable instrument made without consideration. A negotiable instrument made or transferred without consideration creates no obligation. But if any such party has transferred the instrument with or without endorsement to a holder for consideration, such holder or every subsequent holder may recover from the transferor for consideration or any party thereto. Effectively, what it says is, even when there is no consideration in a negotiable instrument originally, but if subsequently it has been transferred to a holder for consideration, and that holder for consideration is protected and he can recover the amount even though originally the instrument was not supported by consideration. Section 45A, holder's right to duplicate of lost bill. Where a bill of exchange has been lost before its due date, the holder may apply to the drawer to give him another bill of the same tenor. Maybe he has to give him a security to indemnify against all persons in case the bill alleged to have been lost shall be found again. If the drawer on request refuses, he can be compelled to do so. Simply put, if you are a holder for consideration and if you have lost the bill, you can ask the drawer to issue a duplicate and the drawer can demand indemnity against any future loss, but he cannot refuse to issue a duplicate bill. Section 118 talks of certain presumptions as to negotiable instruments. We have to understand legal presumptions are a strength to a person who goes to court, because anything covered by a legal presumption need not be again proved in a court. Court presumes it to be true. What are these presumptions which help a person who is a holder of negotiable instrument? Let us just see. Until the contrary is proved, the following presumptions shall be made by courts. 1. Consideration. What is it? Every negotiable instrument was made or drawn for consideration, and that such instrument, when it was accepted, endorsed or transferred, was accepted, negotiated, transferred for a consideration. You need not have to prove in a court that there was consideration. It is presumed by law. If someone says there was no consideration, it was up to him to prove, not for you. And date, it says every negotiable instrument bearing a date was actually made on such a date. No additional proof required. Time of acceptance, it was accepted within a reasonable time after its date, and it was accepted definitely before its maturity. As to time of transfer, it was transferred before its maturity. As to the order of endorsements, for example, it is endorsed from A to B to C to D. It says the endorsement appearing under a negotiable instrument were made in the order in which they appear. There is no need to give a proof. As to stamp, when you lost a promissory note or bill of exchange, presumption is it was duly stamped when we lost it. And every holder is a holder in due course. And that the holder of a negotiable instrument is a holder in due course. These 8 presumptions give a lot of strength to every negotiable instrument which is under a legal case, be it consideration, date, time of acceptance, time of transfer, order of endorsement, and stamping, and also every holder is a holder in due course. If there is a proof that the instrument was obtained from its lawful owner by force or by an offense or fraud, it is for the holder in due course to prove that he is the holder in due course. This is a small requirement when there is a suggestion that it was obtained by means of offense or fraud. Then the holder in due course has to prove his mettle. Else, section 18 has got these presumptions which add a lot of strength to cases involving negotiable instruments. Thus we have covered the various concepts, starting with the promissory note, bill of exchange, check, parties, maturity, and holder in due course, and presumptions. Now let's move into the negotiation, which is the second aspect of negotiable instruments, and its components of endorsement, delivery, who may negotiate, and its impact. Let's understand negotiation. When a promissory note, bill of exchange, or check is transferred to any person so as to constitute the person as holder, the instrument is said to be negotiated. Means, when you transfer a document to another person to make that other person the holder, holder means he becomes the owner of that instrument, and whatever money due under that instrument belongs to the holder. Whenever a bill of exchange or promissory note is or check is transferred to any person to constitute the other person as the holder thereof, that transfer of the instrument is said to be negotiation. It is a process of transferring an instrument to constitute another person as the holder. What happens under negotiation? Under negotiation, there is signing of the instrument for transfer, which is known as endorsement, and then delivery of the document. For example, if B negotiates a document in favor of A, B will sign endorsement and he will deliver the signed document to A. Then negotiation is complete. We will see what endorsement means. When the maker or holder of a negotiable instrument signs, otherwise than as a maker, he signs for the purpose of negotiation on the back or face of the document or on a slip of paper attached to the document, or he so signs for the same purpose intended to be completed as a negotiable instrument, he is said to endorse the same and he is called the endorser. Simply put, when he signs on the back of the instrument, front of the instrument, or on an annexure with an intention to constitute the other person the holder, he is said to endorse the document. One who endorses the document to constitute the other person the holder, he is called the endorser. And if the endorser signs his name only, he simply signs, he doesn't write the name of the payee, he doesn't write the name of the holder, and it is remaining blank, and the endorsement is called as blank endorsement. If he writes, say, on the back of the instrument, pay C or order, he indicates name of C. It is no more blank. It is identifying a special person. It is called as special endorsement. He can also do one more. He can say pay C only, not negotiable, account payee only. Means C cannot transfer to someone else in future. It stops there. Whereas in the previous one, it could be C or order. But in this case, it is C only, not negotiable. He is account payee. This is known as restrictive endorsement. And there are other types of endorsements also, which are called conditional endorsements. Sans recourse, when it says pay C or order sans recourse, no recourse to me, don't come back to me if the bill is dishonored tomorrow. Sans frais, PC or order, sans frais means only amount from me, no expenses will be paid when it comes on maturity. Facultative endorsement, it waives certain rights. Pay C or order, notice of dishonor waived. No need to give him notice of dishonor. It is a favor to the person who becomes the holder. Now, these are different varieties of endorsement, and this talks of blank and full. Besides blank and full, we also have restrictive endorsement. We have got conditional endorsement also, like sans recourse, sans frais, and facultative. Let us learn about delivery part of it from here. As we saw, there should be endorsement and delivery. And when delivery has to be made, the making, acceptance or endorsement of a promissory note or bill of exchange or check is completed by delivery. You endorse and then physically deliver it. It can be actual delivery or constructive delivery. We could communicate to them that we are holding it on their behalf and it is already endorsed. Constructive. Or send an email or physically give the document to them. And always, whenever endorsement takes place, it should be made by the party who is a maker or who is an acceptor or an endorser. Only then it becomes a valid endorsement with the delivery. And as between such parties, the holder who receives the document, he has to be a holder in due course, in good faith, no negligence, and with lot of confidence in the way things are happening. You should have no suspicion or doubt about the nature of transaction. But if he is not a holder in due course, we can always take a stand that though there was a delivery was not for negotiation, it was for some other purpose. It should be endorsement plus delivery. If it is only delivery with no endorsement, or it was delivery for a special purpose, there will not be proper negotiation. This is to protect when the other party is not a holder in due course. And the Act says a promissory note or bill of exchange or check payable to bearer is negotiable by delivery. Because when it is payable to bearer, there is no need to write the name of the person. It simply goes by delivery itself. Just hand over the document. But when it is payable to order, there should be an endorsement by the current holder, and that should be delivery. Means it is endorsement plus delivery which is required in respect of payable to order. In case of payable to bearer, it is only delivery, no endorsement required. This is the main principle under section 46. Same thing is repeated under section 47 and 48. Subject to provisions of section 58, it says. Section 58 simply talks of instruments obtained by unlawful means or unlawful consideration, which are not considered for these two purposes. When they are not covered by section 58 and they are valid documents, payable to bearer is always by delivery. Once again, section 58 says here as a condition, subject to instrument not being covered by section 58, payable to order is by endorsement and delivery. And here this is a case of conversion of endorsement into blank into endorsement in full. How do you do this? Take this endorsement. There is a space on the back of the instrument, pay Mr. So and so or order, and the endorser has to sign. If it is a blank endorsement, the endorser Mr. B has simply signed. He has left this as blank. Now it comes to your hand, because as per section 47 and 48 and also 46, anything which is payable to bearer, this is payable to bearer, there is blank. It is negotiable by delivery. Let us suppose it comes to the hand of D. Name of D nowhere appears. Since it is a bearer instrument, it comes to him. What he can do? Section 49 says, the holder of a negotiable instrument endorsed in blank, holder of an instrument endorsed in blank, he need not have to sign because his name doesn't come anywhere. He can just, by writing the endorser's signature above the endorser's signature, any other person's name, Mr. D, without writing anything, he can just fill up the blank as pay Z. Where is the signature? Signature is already there. And D can transfer it to Z by writing this pay Z, signed B, endorser. Section 49 says you can convert a blank endorsement into a full endorsement under this section. The holder of a negotiable instrument endorsed in blank without signing his own name by writing above endorser's signature direction to pay C, Z or order. We can say Z or order. Convert the endorsement in blank into endorsement in full, and the holder D, who is the current holder who is writing these things, does not incur any responsibility of the endorser. His name nowhere appears. He simply writes the name and then passes it on. This is the beauty of section 49. What is the effect of endorsement? The endorsement of a negotiable instrument transfers to the endorsee the property contained in the instrument with a right of further negotiation. We say pay C or order. When we say pay C or order, means C can further negotiate it further. But there are also chances where we can restrict negotiation. As we saw, we can say pay C only. When you say pay C only, it means a restrictive endorsement. And either he has to receive, and he only has to receive, and he cannot transfer it further. Contents in the endorsement or some specified person. Then, who may negotiate? Every maker, every drawer, every payee, every endorsee, several of them may negotiate the instrument unless there is a restriction in terms of any prior endorsements. And endorsement and negotiation can continue by any of these people. There is a chance that an endorser, as we saw in case of sans recourse endorsement, he can exclude his own liability and stay away from further process of devolvement. For example, D draws a bill, A accepts it, then D makes a sans recourse endorsement to E when you say sans recourse, it means I am endorsing it to you. If the bill is dishonored, don't come back to me. Then E transfers it to F, F transfers it to G, and on the due date, A dishonors. What happens is that once dishonoring takes place, then the cycle works back. G goes to F, F goes to E. It stops at E because beyond E there is a sans recourse endorsement. He cannot go to D. This is the effect of sans recourse endorsement. D is protected fully. What this section says, where an endorser excludes his liability, like what D has done here, and afterwards, if he becomes the holder, he can have all intermediate endorsers as liable to him. Take the same case. Let us say D sans recourse D to E, E to F, F to G. Let us ignore this transaction. Then once it was with G, G endorsed it back to D. D received it. You see the condition here. When an endorser so excludes his liability, afterwards becomes the holder. D became the holder. A dishonors. What A can do? A can go back to G. G can go back to F. F can go back to E. E cannot go back to D. This is what it says. You can have the cake and eat it too. When it is sans recourse, they cannot claim from you. But when the bill comes to you in the course of endorsement, you can claim from all of them. This is what section 52 says. When an endorser so excludes his liability and afterwards becomes the holder of the instrument, all intermediate endorsers are liable to him. And here we are talking of a sans recourse endorsement. Subject to the provisions hereinafter contained on crossed checks, instrument endorsed in blank is always payable to bearer, although it was originally payable to order. Means it may be an order check, pay C or order. If C endorses it blank, it becomes a bearer check. This is what it says. Instruments endorsed in blank are payable to bearer. If a negotiable instrument, after having been endorsed in blank, is endorsed in full, cannot be claimed from the endorser except by the person to whom it has been endorsed in full, or by one who derives title through such person. To go back, if a negotiable instrument, after having been endorsed in blank, is endorsed in full, the amount of it cannot be claimed from the endorser in full except by the person to whom it has been endorsed in full. Means once it becomes a bearer instrument, it cannot go back to the full endorsement stage, and that is the conversion of endorsement into blank into endorsement in full doesn't work in favor of a person when he receives it after it was converted into a blank endorsement. Let us read it once again. If a negotiable instrument, after having been endorsed in blank, is endorsed in full, the amount of it cannot be claimed from the endorser except by the person to whom it has been endorsed in full, or by one who derives the title through such person. Endorsement for part of the sum. Let us take an instance. What section 56 says is, supposing your document is for 100, you cannot endorse it for 50. You can't partially endorse, you have to transfer it fully. There is an alternative. If out of that 100, there is already an entry on the bill that 50 has been paid, only 50 balance remains, you can endorse for the balance amount in full. In the sense, when you do the endorsement, whatever value remaining on that instrument, it has to be fully transferred. That is what section 56 says. Where such amount has been partly paid, A note to that effect may be endorsed on the instrument, which may then be negotiated for the balance, so that the entire document is endorsed in full. In case of negotiation, we have got one endorsement and then delivery to be done. We have to understand both endorsement and delivery has to be done by a single individual or single party, whoever endorses. It can't be one person endorses and the other person delivers. Section 57 says, in respect of people who are dead, the legal representative cannot negotiate by delivery only, because endorsed by the deceased but not delivered by him, both endorsement and delivery has to be done by the same person. Therefore, legal representative cannot deliver which was endorsed by a person who is since deceased. Now, where a negotiable instrument is lost or obtained by offense or fraud for an unlawful consideration, no possessor or endorsee gets a good title except one who claims was a holder in due course. Unless you are a person in good faith, no negligence and no suspicion of any bad deed, you become a holder in due course. Only a holder in due course can make a claim when an instrument passes through activities of offense like of fraud, unlawful consideration and the like. This is what says instrument obtained by unlawful means or unlawful consideration, not worth anything except in the hands of a holder in due course. And every document which is held by you, which is endorsed to you, after dishonor, your remedies will be equal to and never better than the rights of your transferor. The holder of a negotiable instrument who has acquired after dishonor by non-acceptance or non-payment has only against other parties rights of his transferor. He sails in the same boat in which his transferor was sailing. And a negotiable instrument, it can be negotiated so long as it has got negotiable value, and negotiable value ends when it is paid off or when it is satisfied. And once it is paid off or once it is satisfied, it is not available for further negotiation. Just to go through, a negotiable instrument may be negotiated until payment or satisfaction by the maker, drawee or acceptor at or after maturity, but not after such payment or satisfaction. Once it is satisfied, the document doesn't entitle the holder to any payment, hence endorsement doesn't arise. Negotiation completed, we move to the next stage of presentment for acceptance, payment and related matters. Presentment has a few key points. Presentment for acceptance has to be, in case of payable at sight, presented to the drawee after reasonable search within a reasonable time during business hours on a business day. If he cannot be found, the bill is dishonored. Same way, a promissory note payable at a certain period after sight, it has to be presented within a reasonable time during business hours. If there's a default in presentment, no party is liable thereon to the person making such default. And this is crucial. The holder required by the drawee to allow 48 hours to consider whether he will accept it. But this 48 hours decides the further claims in future, because if you give more than 48 hours, it will affect other parties. Presentment could also be through post office, and where it is payable on demand, no presentment is necessary. In case of a bank, the presentation has to be during banking hours. And where a promissory note or bill payable after date, it must be presented for payment at maturity. There are no crucial points here except that business hours, searching, presenting it, not more than 48 hours given for acceptance, and banking hours, one has to make the presentation. If payable by installments, the presentation has to be for each installment the same way it happens with the full payment due on the third day after each date fixed for payment. And if any specified place and no elsewhere is mentioned, it has to be presented for payment at that place only. Even it applies in respect of promissory note and bill of exchange payable at a specified place. Both talk of the specified place and no other place, though it appears to be overlapping. And it must be presented for payment at the place of business or at the usual residence in respect of promissory note and bills of exchange not made payable as mentioned in 68 and 69. If no place of business or fixed residence is specified, we can present it wherever he can be found. If in case of check, extra caution is required in presentment because it has to be prioritized in such a way that the relationship between banker and the drawer should not be altered, as checks are issued always based on a bank balance at a specific date, and we need to have presentation when the bank balance is in our favor. A check must be presented within a reasonable time. It's simple. A negotiable instrument payable on demand must also be presented within reasonable time. And presentment could be done to an authorized agent or to a legal representative or to an assignee in respect of an insolvent. Delay in presentment for reasons beyond control of the holder are excusable, and no presentment is necessary in a few cases which are quite interesting. Number one, if the maker himself intentionally prevents presentment, the holder is ready. Maybe he closes his place of business. He cannot be found after due search. In such a case, presentment is not compulsory. And as against any party sought to be charged therewith, if the party has agreed to pay, then presentment is not required. As against any party who makes part payment and promises to pay the amount due thereon in whole or part and waives his right, this party, he pays, agrees to pay, and then waives his right for the presentment, then presentment is not required. That is the third instance. Fourth instance is as against the drawer. If the drawer has not suffered any damage because of the late presentment, then he doesn't have a remedy against the holder. In such case also, presentment is exempt. Presentment is exempt in 4 instances where the maker himself prevents. Number 2, the party sought to be charged is engaged to pay, notwithstanding the non-presentment. Third, the party makes part payment, agrees to make the balance and waives his right. Fourth, where the drawer has not suffered any damage. In these 4 instances, presentment is excused. And that is the aspect of presentment, and we move over to liability. Let's look into liability of different parties involved. An agent is liable if he doesn't indicate that he is signing as an agent. That will be his personal liability. A legal representative is required to indicate that he expressly limits his liability to the assets received, otherwise his liability will be personal. A drawer, in case of dishonor, has to compensate the holder who has given due notice of dishonor. Drawee of a check, particularly the bank, with sufficient funds of the drawer, has to pay the check, else he has to compensate for the loss incurred by such default. In case of liability of the acceptor, he has to pay at maturity according to apparent tenor of the instrument, and after maturity the payment has to be made on demand. In default, he has to compensate any party for all the loss or damage sustained. Liability of the endorser. Whoever endorses before maturity without excluding his own liability is bound to every subsequent holder to compensate such holder, provided due notice of dishonor is received by him, and every endorser after dishonor is liable upon an instrument payable on demand. Every prior party is liable to a holder in due course until the instrument is duly satisfied. The maker, the drawer, and the acceptor are liable as principal debtors, and the other parties are liable as sureties for the maker, drawer, and acceptor, as the case may be. As between sureties, each prior party is liable as a principal debtor in respect of subsequent party. Where the holder of a negotiable instrument without consent of the endorser destroys endorser's remedy, the endorser is discharged as if instrument had been paid. An acceptor already endorsed is not relieved for the reason that the endorsement is forged, if he had reason to believe the endorsement to be forged when he actually accepted the bill. These are all showing remedies available to principal debtors as well as sureties comprising drawers, acceptor, and endorsers and endorsees. Having covered liability, we move on to discharge with its various components, starting from modes, material alteration, and alteration not apparent. Discharge from liability, we have to just see from the point of view of the maker, acceptor, and endorser. They are discharged by the action of the holder when he cancels such acceptor's name with intent to discharge him and to all parties claiming under such holder. This is the result of cancellation done by the holder. Second, another action of the holder who discharges such maker, acceptor, or endorser and all parties deriving title under him after notice of such a discharge. It is a release which is given by the holder. Third, maker, acceptor, and endorser are making payment to all parties in due course of the amount due thereon, and as a result they are discharged. Discharged from liability of these three parties by cancellation by holder, release by holder, and by payment to all parties. Then discharge by the action of the holder when he allows a drawee more than 48 hours to accept the bill of exchange. In such a case, all previous parties which are not agreeable for more than 48 hours, they are automatically discharged from liability to such holder. It is allowing more than 48 hours exclusive of public holidays for acceptance of a bill of exchange. And in case of a banker, discharge happens when a check payable to order is paid in due course, and where the check is payable to a bearer by payment in due course to the bearer. One thing we have to remember here, section 85 talks of once a check is payable to bearer, its subsequent entries of endorsement or making it an order check doesn't work because of the principle once a bearer check, always a bearer check. Where a check is originally expressed to be payable to bearer, the drawee is discharged by payment in due course to the bearer thereof, notwithstanding, ignoring any endorsement whether in full or blank appearing thereon, and notwithstanding such endorsement purports to restrict or exclude further negotiation. It continues to be a bearer check, and payment against the in the course to the bearer discharges the bank. Section 82 discharges from liability by payment. Section 78 refers to section 82. Whenever the payment has to be made for achieving the discharge, the payment has to be made to the holder of the instrument. As for the interest, when the interest is specified, it has to be calculated on the amount of principal money from the date of instrument till the realization of amount as the court directs. The duration is fixed based on this. And where the rate of interest is not indicated, it has to be calculated at the rate of 18% until realization, or the court directs the duration. But one requirement is that the endorser who is paying interest has to receive the notice of dishonor. Only from the date he receives the notice of dishonor, his interest period starts. And it is required that whichever holder wants to collect the money from a person who is responsible or liable under the instrument, it is required that the document of promissory note or bill of exchange has to be shown to him before the payment, and against the payment it has to be delivered up to him, and if the instrument is lost, he has to be indemnified against any future claim or any further claim on the same. Here we are covering two aspects. One is the qualified acceptance and the second one is material alteration. Qualified acceptance is when the acceptance is given as conditional, undertakes to pay only a part of it, payment at a specified place where no place is mentioned, or it undertakes the payment at some other place and it talks of a time other than at which the order it would be legally due. These qualifications render the acceptance not to the advantage of the other parties involved. If they are not agreeable to the qualified acceptance, they all stand discharged unless they agree to the acceptance. This is parties not consenting to discharged by qualified or limited acceptance. Acceptance has to be as originally planned. It should be unconditional unless it is okayed by the parties. Else the dissenting parties are relieved of their liability under the document. Second, in respect of material alterations. Material alterations pertain to changing certain aspects like the date, amount, endorsement, rate of interest, which are quite material, which affect the mutual rights of various parties involved therein. And such material alterations render the instrument void against any party who is not in agreement with or who has not consented to that, unless it is carried out for the common intention of the persons. The basic reason here is that it prejudices the parties bound under the instrument and hence not in the interest of the rest of the parties who are not involved in the alteration. And any such alteration made by the endorsee will discharge the endorser in respect of the consideration thereof. But there is an exception here. An acceptor or endorser is bound by his acceptance if these alterations were carried out prior to the acceptance or endorsement. These are the two situations where the alteration is not apparent and the bills have been negotiated back. We will have a look at it. Where the material alteration, which otherwise is void, has been so carried out that it doesn't appear on the face of it, and payment thereof by the person or the banker based on the apparent tenor of the instrument in due course, without any negligence and in good faith, although there is an alteration, since it is not apparent, discharged from all liability. It is mainly because material alteration doesn't appear in the normal examination of the document. Second, when the bills have negotiated back and the acceptor holds back the bills after it has come back through negotiation to him, in such a case, it gets cancelled on its own if a bill of exchange negotiated after maturity held by the acceptor in his own right, all rights of action thereon are extinguished. A clear case of negotiation back and extinction of rights of action thereon. This is an occasion to understand general crossing, special crossing, and how the banker is discharged in respect of the crossed checks. Let us first understand general crossing, where a check bears across its face and company between two parallel traverse lines with or without the words not negotiable. It is deemed a crossing and it is called a general crossing. And if a check bears the name of a banker in a generally crossed check, it is called specially crossed to that banker. And banker's responsibility in these two cases are slightly different. But there are certain options. A check can be crossed even when it is already crossed generally. An uncrossed check can be crossed generally or specially. It doesn't result in material alteration. It improves the quality of security. If a check is crossed generally, the holder can cross it specially. If the check is crossed generally or specially, one can add the word not negotiable, strengthening it further. If it is crossed specially, the banker can again cross it to his agent for collection. These are all crossing after the issue. And how does the banker pay the checks? Payment of checks crossed generally, it has to be paid to a banker. Banker shall not pay to anyone else. It should be paid through banking channels. If the check is paid crossed specially to a banker, a bank shall pay only to the specified banker or his agent for collection, not general omnibus bankers. And where a check is crossed specially more than one banker, it is not regular and banker are supposed to refuse payment on such checks. Taking further, payment in due course of crossed checks. If a banker has paid the check in due course with proper care and he and the drawer both for the payment in due course are relieved and their responsibility to the holder of the check or the true owner is discharged, and the payment in due course is considered as if the payment is received by the true owner as per 128 section. And paying check crossed otherwise than to a banker, it doesn't discharge a banker, it is a mistake and they are liable to the true owner. The banker is liable. He is not supposed to make payment otherwise than to a banker in respect of a check crossed. Where a check is bearing not negotiable, a person taking a check not negotiable is not a holder in due course. He will not get a title better than what his transferor had. Therefore, he gets the same rights as the transferor had. He never gets a better title of holder in due course. Here is a case where a banker in good faith received payment for his customer and the customer's title proved defective. But the banker acting in good faith and without negligence protects him and he will have no liability for receiving the payment of a check for his customer with due care and without negligence and in good faith. That ends the discharge. From here on, we move to dishonor. We will study non-acceptance, non-payment, notice of dishonor, noting and protest, remedies under section 138, and a listing of offences and penalties. Here we talk about dishonor by non-acceptance, dishonor by non-payment, and notice to be given whenever there is a dishonor, and what are the requirements of notice. Non-acceptance is when the drawee makes default in accepting when he is required to accept, or he has become incompetent, or the acceptance is qualified or conditional, and in all these three cases it becomes dishonor and dishonor by non-acceptance. By non-payment, when the maker of the note or acceptor of the bill or drawee of the check default in payment and when being duly required to pay, that is dishonor by non-payment under section 92. The moment there is a dishonor by non-acceptance or dishonor by non-payment, the holder must give notice that the instrument has been dishonored to all parties whom he wants to make liable, jointly or individually, as required to get the right redressal. And the notice that he gives, it can be given to the parties before him, all other parties, to their authorized agent or legal representative, or in case of insolvency to an assignee of a person. It can be oral or written, it can be sent by post, but must inform that the instrument has been dishonored and how it has been dishonored, by acceptance, non-acceptance or non-payment. And it should also highlight that the party will be held liable on that count. And the notice has to be given within a reasonable time at the place of business or at the residence of the party whom we want to deliver the notice on. And if the notice is sent by post and if it is lost in the post, doesn't matter, it doesn't render the notice invalid. That is regarding the initial part of dishonor. Section 95 to 98 talks of subsequent notices to be given by the respective recipients. And any party receiving notice, in order to render prior parties liable, they have to give notice of dishonor within reasonable time, unless such other party receives due notice directly from the holder. Similarly, the agent who receives notice on behalf of his principal needs to give notice to his principal. For that he requires time, and the principal in his turn, he will require period to give notice of dishonor to other parties whom he wants to hold liable. And when the party to whom the notice dispatched is dead and the party dispatching the notice is ignorant, notice is workable, it is sufficient. And no notice is necessary, just like we saw in case of presentment. Here almost similar grounds. No notice required when dispensed by the party. Where drawer himself has countermanded the payment, he doesn't needs to be given a notice. Party charged doesn't suffer damage for want of notice. Party entitled to notice cannot be found or unable without any fault of the holder to give notice to him. And when the acceptor is also a drawer, there is no need to give him a notice. And where the promissory note is not negotiable, in such a case the parties are not different, therefore no need to give a notice. And also in a case where the party, knowing the facts, promises to pay the amount due on the instrument, in these 7 cases, notice of dishonor may be ignored and it might be considered as not necessary. Section 99 to 101 mainly talk of noting and protest and the contents of protest. Section 99 talks of whenever a promissory note or bill of exchange is dishonored by non-acceptance or non-payment, the holder should get the same noted by a notary public, either upon the instrument or on a paper attached thereto. And such a note must state the date and the reason for dishonor, and it should be done within a reasonable time. And the reason why the holder treat this as dishonored has to be stated therein, and also the notary's charges. Now there is a concept of protest, means on the noting within a reasonable time, we can cause such dishonor to be certified and noted by the notary public, as the certificate is called protest. And this protest can also be for better security, more particularly when the acceptor's credit has been publicly impeached and a weakening of security is faced. And in such a case, we can cause the notary public to demand a better security, and on refusal, he may cause such refusal to be noted and certified. And that certificate for better security is known as protest for better security. And the certificate of protest under section 100 literally includes the transcript of the instrument, name of the person against whom the protest is issued, statement that the payment was demanded by the notary, terms of his answer. If he gave no answer, a statement to that effect, or if he could not be found, that also will be indicated in the certificate. The place and time of dishonor, and when better security has been refused, place and time of refusal also will be indicated. Subscription of the notary public will be a part of the certificate. If the acceptance was for payment for honor, details of the transaction as to for whom and by whom it is given, for offering and effecting the same. Section 138 elaborately provides for the legal remedy wherever the checks are dishonored for specified reasons. When the check drawn for payment of any amount for the discharge of a legally enforceable debt, here we need to note that anything which is pertaining to a gift or charity is not covered. It has to be a legally enforceable debt or other liability, and the check is returned unpaid, either because the money standing to the credit of the account is insufficient or exceeds arrangement. We have to note that insufficient funds, exceeds arrangement, account closed, refer to drawer, stop payment, signature differs are all covered adequately under these heads only. And whenever these things are confirmed, the person shall be deemed to have committed an offense, and it attracts punishment with imprisonment for a term extending to 2 years and fine twice the amount of the check or both. But there is a requirement to be fulfilled under this section. The check presented to the bank within a period of 6 months from the date it was drawn, or within its validity, whichever is earlier. That is regarding the period, 6 months or period of validity, whichever is earlier. And the payee or the holder in due course makes a demand by giving a notice in writing within 30 days of receiving check bounce information from the bank, and the drawer fails to make the payment after the notice to the holder in due course within 15 days of receipt of notice. 1. Presentation of check. Second thing, he must be delivered a notice within 30 days asking for payment, and after receipt of notice the drawer fails to pay the amount within next 15 days. If these conditions are fulfilled, then it attracts and fits into the requirements of section 138 for remedy in respect of checks returned for insufficiency of funds and the checks pertain to a legally enforceable debt or other liability. Similarly, section 141 talks of offences by companies. The person committing an offence under section 138, when it is a company, every person who was in charge, responsible to the company, and also the company included, will be deemed guilty unless the person liable proves that the offence was committed without his knowledge and he exercised all due diligence to prevent the commission of such offence. And one thing to note, section 138 doesn't apply to a nominee director who has been holding the office by virtue of his employment with central government, state government or financial corporation, and he shall not be liable for prosecution. And going further, subsection 1 states that if it is proved that the offence was committed with the consent and connivance of any director, manager, secretary or other officer, such director, manager, secretary or other officer shall be deemed to be guilty of the offence and shall be proceeded against and punished accordingly. That way, Section 138 read with Section 141 conveys the offence of return of checks has got stringent punishment under the Negotiable Instruments Act. That covers the aspect of dishonor from non-acceptance to notice, protest, Section 138 and offence and penalties. We have a brief comparison of promissory note, bill of exchange and check under various heads. That covers Negotiable Instrument Acts with all its aspects, and the summary of concepts: negotiation, presentment, liability, discharge, dishonor, and its various subcomponents as we have seen under the presentation foregone. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.